Welcome to the second in our webinar series, Protecting the Next Generation of North Carolinians. Today's focus is keeping kids safe from online crime. We are glad you're here. Before getting started, I'd like to give our interpreters, Monse Ramirez and Dulce Balderas, a few minutes to provide instructions on how to use the interpretation feature.
I will say these instructions in Spanish. Hola, buenos días. Vamos a tener interpretación simultánea a través de Zoom. Pueden buscar el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior de su pantalla y ahí seleccionar español para escuchar esta presentación en ese idioma. Si están ingresando a través de un teléfono inteligente, pueden buscar hasta la derecha los 3 puntitos en la parte inferior y ahí seleccionar interpretación de idiomas y similarmente escoger español como su idioma preferido y dar finalizado. Ya que hagan esto, van a poder escuchar la presentación en español. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much. That concludes our announcement.
A few housekeeping notes. The webinar is available on both Zoom and YouTube. The YouTube live stream can be accessed at youtube.com/NCAGO/streams. The link to YouTube is also available on the registration page. Transcription is available on Zoom and can be turned on via the button at the bottom of the screen. We have a limited amount of time today, but we'll try to address questions that are not covered in the webinar in a follow-up email. On Zoom, please submit questions using the Q&A feature. And if you are joining on YouTube, please email questions to outreach@ncdoj.gov. In addition to any follow-up questions, we will also share a recording of the webinar after the presentation. We are honored and excited to have a great group of presenters today, North Carolinians who are passionate about educating the public on internet crime and helping to keep our kids safe. Each of these presenters brings their own background and connection to this important issue, and we look forward to hearing more from them in their presentations. And now we're pleased to welcome Leander Wright, President and co-founder of Not Today. Linda and her husband, Carolina Panthers head coach Frank Wright, founded Not Today in 2019 with one goal in mind: to protect children. To that end, Linda has a few opening remarks.
Good morning, and thank you, Sarah. My name is Linda Wright. We are so glad that you are all here today. We are here today because we have a common passion. That's to protect our children. Today, we will be providing a lot of valuable information, giving us all tools which will assist us in keeping our children safe from technological predators and the like. As mentioned, my husband, head coach of the Panthers, Frank Wright, and I began the Not Today Foundation in 2019 because we saw a growing need to create awareness and protect children from sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. During our many years working in the NFL, we've had the opportunity to live in many cities, from the East Coast to the West Coast and North and South. And we have seen this issue rise to epidemic proportions in our country, causing incredible devastation mentally, emotionally, and physically to our nation's children and their families. We are so excited to team up with these amazing partners and tackle this issue together. We want to ensure that all of us are equipped with the information needed to spot red flags and to navigate this technologically driven landscape in which we all live today. You will see links to our Parent and Caregiver Protection Guide booklet below, which are many of the tools created for you and available for you today in both Spanish and English. On that note, I am honored to introduce Attorney General Josh Stein, and I'm encouraged by his involvement and his proactivity with this webinar strategy to serve our community and to keep our children safe from harm.
Linda, thank you for those warm words, and thank you, more importantly, for the work that you and Frank are doing to keep kids safe, not only here in North Carolina, but across the country. So really appreciate what you're doing. I also want to recognize and thank our other presenters as well. BOS Zelinger, who is a Special Deputy Attorney General and head of my office's Special Prosecution Section, will be speaking, as will Kevin Roughton, a special agent in charge with the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, and Catherine Pomeroy, who's an Assistant District Attorney with the Wake County Special Victims Unit. And I want to thank all of you for taking time to share your experiences and your learnings with us. As everyone may know, this is our second in a series about protecting the next generation. And I know that firsthand how worrying it can be to raise our kids and try to help them navigate the many challenges that they face, especially because those challenges are different than the ones that we faced growing up. Our kids are experiencing depression, anxiety, drug misuse, addiction, self-injury, and suicide at alarming rates. The U.S. Surgeon General has declared it a youth mental health crisis. And while we wish there were a single easy solution, we know it's more complicated than that. So we're holding today's webinar and others in this series to help give anyone who cares for kids the information and tools that they need to help our young people successfully overcome these challenges and get the help that they need to succeed. One place we have to focus on is the internet, which unfortunately can be a weapon that criminals use to harm our kids. Between 2021 and 2022, the FBI saw a 600% increase in sextortion cases in North Carolina. These are cases where a criminal tries to extort money from someone by threatening to expose or publish sexual content of them. Last year, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received more than 32 million reports of suspected child sex exploitation and child sex abuse material. It's terrifying because when law enforcement makes arrests in these cases, we learn far too often that they are people who could be in proximity to our kids in the real world. In recent months, in North Carolina alone, authorities have charged a firefighter, a high school coach, and a babysitter with charges related to child sex abuse and exploitation. We never want our kids to be in danger. And the internet only increases the possibility that our kids could encounter somebody who wants to harm them. So in 2019, my office drafted and championed the Safe Child Act to protect kids wherever they are. The law expanded the duty to report child sex abuse to every adult. Anyone 18 years or older must report sex abuse to local law enforcement. And remarkably, that was not previously the case in North Carolina. And online, the Safe Child Act bars high-risk sex offenders from contacting anyone under the age of 16 using social media or social networking platforms, collecting information about anyone under the age of 16, or violating social media platform policies. As further evidence to how quickly the world is constantly changing, when we drafted this law and got it through the General Assembly in bipartisan fashion, we didn't anticipate artificial intelligence. We are now seeing how common it's become and how unprepared we are for the safety risk it poses. So in September, I led a bipartisan coalition of state attorneys general from across this country to urge Congress to take a closer look at how AI might be used to exploit children and how necessary it is for them to pass legislation now to prevent such abuse. I do want to say a word of thanks and acknowledge the work that the Biden administration is doing on this issue and for taking it so seriously. They just announced a big AI proposal this week. We simply cannot afford to let our laws lag behind technology because our kids are on the line. What I've just described is, of course, only some of the work that we're doing at the Department of Justice to protect children. As BOS will discuss in a moment, we have prosecuted several cases related to child sex abuse here in North Carolina and will shed more light on cases involving online crimes against kids. Agent Roughton will provide a broader overview of what kinds of online crimes are commonly being committed against kids and how those kinds of criminals operate. And Assistant District Attorney Pomeroy will speak to her experience prosecuting these cases and what parents can do right now to talk to their kids to help protect them online. These are tough conversations to have and to get started. I understand this as a parent myself. So to make it a little easier, my office has created a tool particularly helpful for parents of elementary and middle school kids. It's called a Family Tech Agreement. And what it does is spark conversations between kids and their parents about how to responsibly use the internet. Each parent is going to draw the lines for themselves about what makes the most sense in their family. But the critical issue is for parents to have those conversations. What does responsible internet usage look like in your household? I've been going around to elementary schools all across the state talking to fifth graders about this Family Tech Agreement. But of course, you all can help us spread the word. We're going to drop a link in the chat about how you can access the Family Tech Agreement. Again, I want to thank all of our panelists in advance for sharing their experiences and expertise with us today. And I want to thank everyone who has joined this webinar so that you can learn more about what we can do together to better protect our kids. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, BOS Zelinger. BOS.
Thank you, and thank you for having me to talk here today. We've got some slides prepared that we want to talk about, and here they are in front of you. And I'm a prosecutor. I've been a prosecutor my entire career. I used to work in the Wake County District Attorney's Office. I've been a federal prosecutor, and now I lead our AG's office, Special Prosecutions Unit. And the statistics are staggering. 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys is a victim of child sex abuse. And these stats are increasing. And Agent Rotten will tell you a little bit about how victimization of boys has increased. Over the course of their lifetime, 28% of U.S. youth aged 14 to 17 have been sexually victimized. If we can go ahead to the next slide, data suggests that for children aged 10 to 14, roughly 10 to 14% have experienced sexual solicitation, with 3% then making offline contact with our online perpetrator. And in most of the cases that I prosecute, the vast majority are children who've been sexually abused by somebody known to them, a family member, a coach, a teacher, someone that they know in the community. And, you know, everyone's heard the phrase stranger danger. That's really moved now from a child encountering somebody on the street to now encountering somebody online. And these folks that abuse children online can come from every walk of life. I've sat down in victims' houses across our state and heard some horrifying stories of kids who've been abused by people from all different sorts of walks of life. And some of them are some of the most trusted people in our communities. And if we can go ahead to the next slide. This is the statute that sort of dictates what we can prosecute. And so I just provided this so parents have an idea of what we as prosecutors are doing to sort of combat this. This is North Carolina General Statute 14-202.3, which is the solicitation of child by computer or certain other electronic devices to commit an unlawful sex act. And basically what we have prosecuted and what we continue to prosecute are people over the age of 16 years of age who, by means of a computer or any other device capable of electronic data storage or transmissions, that might be an Xbox, it might be a cell phone, it might be a computer, entices, advises, coerces, orders or commands a child, that is somebody less than 16 years of age, to meet with the defendant for the purpose of committing an unlawful sex act. And if we can go ahead to the next slide, it provides some of the sentencing on this issue. And so this is a Class H felony. However, if the defendant shows up to meet with what they suspect is a child, then it's a Class G felony. And sometimes, you know, these solicitations, you might say, well, where does this occur? This occurs all over the internet. But the most frequent place that we see it are on social media or applications on kids' phones that are ubiquitous. We see it on Instagram, we see it on Tinder, we see it on Snapchat, we see it on WhatsApp. And my goal here isn't to frighten parents, but it is to provide a little context for what we see in the criminal justice system. And what we see sometimes is kind of scary. If we could go ahead to the next slide. This is an individual that I prosecuted back when I was in the Wake County DA's office. And this individual, John Thomas Peters, was a mall Santa. That is a guy who shows up and, has children sit on his lap. There's an element of trust that parents have with, mall Santas and people in our community in general. And this individual, the way that he solicited young people, I think is really instructive because he found kids that had pictures on modeling websites and then engaged in inappropriate online conversations. He did this with a 15-year-old girl. And the one other big takeaway that I'd like you to take from me talking today is for parents and school officials or anyone to sort of trust your instinct, trust your gut. In this case, a mom was concerned, sort of looked in her daughter's phone and found some sort of graphic conversations. Law enforcement then posed as her daughter and was able to have this individual meet with them. And he was eventually convicted of second-degree sexual exploitation of a minor and soliciting a minor by computer and ended up going to prison. If we could go to the next slide. This is a different mall Santa. This is Leander Dewey Jones. And again, this is sort of similar facts. He was originally charged with several counts of second-degree exploitation of a minor. Again, by using these social media sources, he eventually was prosecuted. And if you could head to the next slide, went to prison for a long time for soliciting and creating child porn. And the reason I bring these cases up, again, is not to scare you, but to give you an idea of some of the places where these individuals are found. Recently in our Court of Appeals, there was a case from New Hanover County that was prosecuted by District Attorney Ben David's district down there, in which a defendant solicited a 15-year-old via Snapchat and Instagram, things that many kids are using. This defendant began messaging her about sexual activity, had her come over, gave her money and alcohol. And in a lot of these cases, we see these benefits being given by defendants. They'll pose as modeling agencies that'll say, send me pictures and provide money to young people in order to sort of drag them into these schemes. In this case, in State v. Wilkinson, the FBI received an anonymous tip that likely was from a local parent. And so that's, again, me advocating for being intrusive, not just in your kid's life, but also in their friends' lives and try to have a sense of what's going on. But when that individual came for an in-person encounter, they were arrested and convicted eventually of 2 counts of indecent liberties of the child, providing alcohol to a minor, and contributing to delinquency of a minor. If we could go to the next slide. There are, in addition to these mainstream sort of applications and websites that kids use, there are some terrifying websites out there. This is, and we see them come up and then be taken down and then come up and be taken down. In about 5 minutes of doing research this week, I found this website, which is KidsChat, which is a chat room website for teens aged 13 to 19 years of age. And there's a lot on the internet about how websites like this are full of people that are not teenagers. And so this, to me as a prosecutor, seems like the worst idea possible, because that people are posing on these websites who are actually pedophiles and sex offenders, trying to engage in conversations with young people. And so that's just something to be on the lookout for. If we could go ahead and head to the next slide. And these are just some of the applications that we see frequently. I don't know if Pinterest is really the biggest one, but I would encourage you to know sort of what's out there on your kids' phones and what they're using, because TikTok, Instagram, all these social media websites can be used by folks soliciting children to reach out. And you don't just have to take my word for it. You can see it in our criminal courts around the state. And with that, I'll turn it over to Special Agent in Charge Kevin Roughton, who's doing a fantastic job of trying to address what's going on in our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Boz. I greatly appreciate the invitation to be here today and talk about what's going on in the space of internet crimes against children. One of the elements of online crimes. There are many other avenues with cyberbullying and hacking and stalking and lots of things. But today, my remarks will really be focused on internet crimes against children as it relates to child exploitation or child solicitation. When I talk about internet crimes against children, there's a national program of 61 coordinated task forces across the country that are focused on this. So if you look at a map, really that breaks down to pretty much one per state. A couple of the larger states have multiple, but for the most part, it's one per state. And for North Carolina, the task force agency is the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. Inside of North Carolina, we run a local task force, the North Carolina Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, that we partner with police departments, sheriff's departments throughout the state, focusing on these crimes. If you look at a map of just what the SBI has, our resources, what you will see is that we have one agent for each of those colored counties. So really, we're spread pretty thin. We're looking at an agent covering 5 to 6 counties, sometimes as many as 10 or 12 counties per agent. And you'll see in just a few moments and some numbers, that's not nearly enough to combat this. So really, the backbone of the ICAC task force in North Carolina is these local agencies, these local departments. So really what that looks like is what you're seeing on your screen now. Those are the police departments and sheriff's departments that we partner with across the state. And likely there is a police department or sheriff's department in your area that has someone dedicated to this mission and to this fight. And again, we can't do this without them as the SBI. I mentioned numbers. If we look at numbers historically over the last 10 or 12 years, you'll see that for the most part, cyber tips, and I'll get to that, what they are in just a moment, but they go up progressively just a little bit year over year, and that's to be expected. But you'll see this huge spike in 2020, and then even more in 2021, and of course, even more last year in 2022. So let's just focus down and look at these last couple of years at what has happened. These are the numbers on a monthly basis of what's occurring just in the state of North Carolina for cyber tips. If you focus in on March and April of 2020, of course, we probably all know what happened in the world at that point with COVID. And we saw our tips pretty much double almost instantaneously, which makes sense because we had pretty much all of the students across the state were put into virtual classrooms instead of being in a physical classroom. We had workers from across the state that were put into remote working environments. So literally there were more people online at the same time than ever before in the history of the world. So it makes sense that tips would go up. What hasn't made sense is that as COVID has passed and things are pretty much back to normal, you look at our last few months, those are the highest months we've had. Tips have continued to go up month over month and year over year until, again, our most recent months are our highest months. And so this is a problem that is not going away. It is only increasing. So I talk about cyber tips. So let's talk for a second. What is a cyber tip? What do I mean by that? A cyber tip comes from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They have a federal mandate to be the national clearinghouse when it comes to child exploitation and child pornography types of crimes. So electronic service providers, if they find this type of content on their networks, are required to make that report to the cyber tip line. The cyber tip line, what they do at that point, or what happens then, they review that tip, they review the information that's contained in it, and they try to narrow down the potential location of where those involved in this criminal act may have been located, whether that's from the suspect side or whether that's on the victim side. And then once they make that determination of where they believe these individuals are, then they will refer that out to the local ICAC regional affiliate, which again, for North Carolina is the SBI. So the numbers that the National Center is dealing with are huge. It was referenced earlier, 32 million reports just last year. And of those 32 million, 99.5% relate to CSAM. What CSAM is child sexual abuse material. Commonly, a lot of people would refer to it as child pornography. So we talk about these cyber tips and we talk about these numbers. And so we're a lot of times get under the impression that cyber tips are really those that are the creepy pedophiles, so to speak, in some dark web or a deep hidden place that's on the internet. But unfortunately, that is really not true at all. If we look at just in North Carolina, what we received last year, Facebook, Google, Instagram, and Snapchat accounted for 56% of all of the tips we were found in North Carolina that were reported to us. All the other platforms combined only made up 44%. So again, it's not this deep, hidden place on the internet or this dark web type of thing. Those are certainly have their dangers, and I'm not saying that they're okay. But what I'm saying is that we as law enforcement, we as the criminal justice community, but even more so, we as parents, I'm a parent as well, we need to understand the dangers on social media. And that includes all social media. Not that social media is bad, but that it can be used as a tool against our children. And we need to fully understand that. And we need to prepare ourselves and our children how to defend against attacks that may come at them on social media, one of those being child sexual abuse or child exploitation. So how do we chat or text or message or whatever term you want to use there? How do we do that safely? We can do that when we chat between known friends. And the word known is obviously highlighted there. And the reason for that is that we have to know, physically know, have met them, who's on the other end of this conversation. If we don't know who's on the other end of the conversation, we really don't know who we're talking to. We also need to realize and train ourselves and train our children that chat is flat. And what I mean by that is not that it occurs on a flat screen or something, but what I mean is that it lacks emotion or intonation of voice or inflections. So when we say something or read something, it's different. We can hear the inflection in someone's voice and what they may mean, but when we read it, we have no context of that. We can only interpret it by what's occurring in our mind at the time that we're reading it. So if I was eating something and said, "Wow, did you taste that?" Then I was talking to you, you would understand what I meant by that. I'm kind of excited about it and stuff. Or if I said, "Wow, did you taste that?" You would get the impression that I didn't like it. However, if I just texted that to you and it was flat with no inflection, you really wouldn't understand what I meant by that. So we have to understand that we as adults misinterpret things in emails at times, or we've sent an email perhaps that has been misinterpreted on the other end. And so we need to train our children in that and really understand what is going on, or to ask clarifying questions about what is meant rather than assuming what is meant. The other thing is that we have to chat carefully without full trust at first. Even if we believe we know who's on the other end of this conversation, just because it's a name there or just because it's a picture there of someone that we know, that account may not be theirs. Most accounts don't have a verification process that makes sure that the name and the picture that's being used is in fact that person. So if someone uses a name that we're familiar with or that we believe we know, or uses a picture of someone, until we have verified that that person is who they are, we really don't know based on just the name. So what we can do when we're talking with that person is ask a question that only they would know the answer to. So if, for instance, if this is your child in school and they have someone that they believe is in their history class that has reached out and has tried to chat with them online, and they're a new contact in this social media platform, then we could ask a question that occurred in history class that only someone sitting in that class would know. And if that person can answer the question, then certainly we verified that they, in fact, were in the history class and we know who that person is. Or we can see them in class the next day and say, "Hey, did you send me a friend request?" And verify that that person who they say they are before we fully trust just the name that's on the screen or the picture they're displaying. Additionally, we must realize that all chat and media is saved, it is shared, it is reviewed. And one of the biggest platforms that I think is miscommunicated or misinterpreted in this, that is one of the most popular, is Snapchat. Snapchat's entire premise is that everything is deleted. That's kind of the premise of their entire app, is you can send a message, you can read a message, and it's immediately deleted and it's disappeared. Nobody sees it. If you recall back a little earlier, I mentioned Snapchat is one of our top reporters. We get more cyber tips from them than many others. How are we getting those cyber tips if in fact that is deleted? And the fact is that it's not necessarily deleted. And if you read their terms and conditions, you'll find that it's not always deleted. So the chat is reviewed by them when they find content that they believe needs to be reported. It's sent to the National Center. It's sent to the SBI. It's sent to local law enforcement. Many people may be involved in this process of reviewing what is purported to be, and our youth a lot of times believe, is a private message. It is absolutely not a private message, and they need to understand that. And then lastly, understanding that everyone puts on a type of persona. When you're communicating online with someone, you're talking with them, most people will portray how they want to be portrayed or perceived, as opposed to what may in fact be factually accurate. And we need to train our children in that sometimes what they see on the internet obviously may not be exactly how it is. And so like I said, that's just kind of training points. The bottom line in all of this, though, is if you wouldn't put it up here, then don't put it here. That is what the internet is essentially used as, is a billboard. And when we're putting it out there, even though it may say that it's private, we may think it's private, the reality is there really isn't such a thing as a private message when it's on a social media platform. Recently, we have tried to bring awareness to this through a partnership with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. We partnered with a group called The Third Talk and with the North Carolina Center for Safer Schools, and made a joint video to bring awareness to this issue. This video was made available to every high school and middle school throughout the state. There's a link that you can see there on the screen, vimeo.com/NCICAC, and you can find this video that will bring awareness to this. Again, putting it into the hands of our students, because they're the ones that really need to be taught to protect themselves. One of the things that's already been mentioned earlier that they really need to protect themselves from now is this element of sextortion. Sextortion is something that, as you've heard already, has taken hundreds of % increase just in the last couple of years. And what sextortion is when there's a communication with a child and that child sends a picture or video that may be compromising in some way, and then the person they sent it to blackmails them or extorts them to get money. This financially motivated sextortion, we have seen a huge increase in recently, to the point that there have been numerous instances of suicide and other tragic events based on this. So sextortion is definitely a problem. We're seeing it throughout the country. This slide here is just a series of recent headlines from all places throughout the country talking about sextortion, the danger of it. In New York, in Florida, in Canada, in all these different places, we're seeing the same thing. We're seeing these dangers. And again, our children need to understand what these dangers are and how really they can protect themselves. You see those last couple of pictures in that. It's not just the recluse child that we have to worry about, or the child with posed dangers that we may know about. Sometimes it's the most popular kid in school. It's the person that's on the football team. It's the cheerleader. It's the star student. It's any of those that may get caught up in this just as quickly if they're not careful with what they're doing online. So we're trying to get information into the hands of kids of, okay, if you're being blackmailed, that's happening to them. We have to be proactive in getting it to them. What do they do about it? Because once it happens, it escalates very quickly, sometimes in a matter of minutes from the time that this picture is sent until they're being exploited, until things turn really, really bad really quick. And again, most of the time, this is in a span of minutes. So they need to have this information in advance. We need to have the conversation with our children now for what happens if something goes bad. And this resource here is from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. You'll get more information about that later. But what we do if you're being blackmailed, and again, the point is we have to get this information into the hands of our kids. If we look at just numbers and statistics for a second, what we will find is that last year, between males and females, there were about 60% of males that reported sextortion. What we've learned, I've learned just in the last week or two, is that year to date so far this year, that has even transitioned further to where almost 80% male of the financially motivated sextortions that are occurring throughout the country. A couple other things I'll point out to you on this slide is the bottom left there, the 45% involve more than one platform. That's a common tactic that we need to understand and we need to educate our kids on, that when they're communicating with someone on one platform and they want to switch them to a different method or a different mode of communication, a different platform, that should be a red flag automatically. Not that it can never happen and there's not a legitimate reason, but that should be a red flag of something else going on. The other thing I'll point out to you all the way on the right-hand side of that slide is that victims are very unlikely to report. In fact, only about half of them ever report it, even to their family or friends, their closest friends. If we go to reporting it to a platform or the website itself, it's only about 1 out of 4. If we look at how many actually get reported to law enforcement, it's less than 1 in 5. Less than 20% of those are actually reported to law enforcement. And what I'm telling you is that law enforcement has seen a 6 or 700% increase year over year in the last couple of years. And we don't even know about 1 out of 5 of them. One thing that you can do, there's a documentary. When I say documentary, you may go, documentary. It's kind of a thriller. It's an exciting film. It's a full-length movie. It's called The Hidden Pandemic, Sextortion. It's a great movie, extremely well produced. It will keep your attention. It will keep your kids' attention. I highly recommend it to have this viewing of this movie. Watch it together with your kids to start this conversation around what sextortion is. You can get it various places online. You can stream it from all these different platforms. It's available. It's very affordable to do. Highly recommend you take a look at that because it is a way that you can engage a conversation with your kids about this. A couple of resources that are available out there through the ICAC Task Force. If you go to icactaskforce.org, up in the very top right, there's an internet safety tab, and you can read about the internet safety, and you can see this hashtag start the conversation. That's one of the most important things, is that we've got to engage. We have to be proactively talking to our kids about this. There's numerous resources there, including, as was mentioned earlier, the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory. There's information from the Pew Research Center, from research from the University of New Hampshire. There's stuff about Safer Internet Day. There's sextortion awareness and prevention, videos and resources that are there. And some of this is split up into sections. So there's a parent section, there's a youth section, and you can just click on which of those sections apply to you, how to get those resources, but lots and lots of information that's there. And the last thing I'll say is one resource I would point out to you is trying to get this particular resource out as many places as we can, whether that's in your school, whether it's in your church, your civic organization, your community building in the area, but making this information available to our kids so that if they are a victim, they know what to do. If someone is trying to sextort them, as it is, then they know that there's resources. They've seen this information before, and they're not caught off guard and don't know how to respond. They have the information in their hands ahead of time to respond to it. Thanks again for allowing me to be here and speak to you for a few moments. At this point, I will hand it over to Catherine. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Obviously, both Boz and Kevin have shown and demonstrated that there are some serious safety concerns for our kids online. But the internet is here and it's not going away. And so the question for most parents is not if you're going to give your child a phone, but when, and how do you do that as safely as possible? And the number one thing that it starts with is talking to your kids. Now, it used to be we talked to our kids about, I think it was referred to as stranger danger, or the person offering candy, saying they lost a pet, talking to our kids about what we do when we get separated in a public place. But now that danger can reach our kids even when they're sitting next to us in our living rooms on the couch. And that's because of the internet. And so this does start with having to talk to your children about the dangers when it comes to the internet. Having those full open conversations really is our first line of defense. And part of that, as mentioned by the Attorney General, is doing a technology or cell phone contract before you just hand your child a phone or a tablet that's connected to the internet. I think that these kinds of contracts can help guide your conversations, and they emphasize the seriousness to our kids about being on the internet. Next slide. There are numerous examples of contracts that are out there, and the North Carolina Department of Justice has an example of one that you can use. I've put the link there. You can also create your own, kind of deciding what is right for your family. I would suggest to you to consider whether or not you're going to include the requirement that apps have to be approved before they can be downloaded, requiring where a device will be charged at night when there's not as much supervision, and whether you're going to limit screen time. And obviously, of course, that they will not be used while kids are driving if they're of driving age. Next screen. One of the biggest things that I hear, when parents end up in my office, something terrible has happened. And when I talked to those parents about, kind of what was happening before this incident, most of them tell me, I didn't know how to talk to my child about internet safety because I don't understand it. And that's understandable. Most of us did not grow up in this age of the internet and cell phones. And so it's overwhelming and it's daunting to think about, how do I talk to my child about this who seems like they understand it so much better than I do? And luckily for us, if we can go to the next slide, there are a ton of different resources that are trusted resources out there that you can go to. Kind of two of the largest ones, the first being the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I've put their website there. If you go on their website, there's an education tab you can go on. They have a whole program of Net Smarts. It has presentations, tip sheets, both for parents and kids. And also, as mentioned, the Internet Crimes Against Children, or the ICAC. You can go on their website. They have both under the resources tab information, and also under their internet safety tab. If we can go to the next, there's a ton of other places to find things too. So Family Online Safety Institute has a great section for parents that includes toolkits for parents on digital parenting. That's available both in English and Spanish. Thorn actually walks parents through different stages of technology maturity for each kind of age group for kids. If you're into podcasts, then Connect Safely has some great ones, both English and Spanish. So I would definitely check those out. It is our responsibility to educate ourselves so we can protect our kids. There is a blog post that I have added the link to at the bottom here that can give you step-by-step instructions on some of the apps that you may see with your kids and how to go in and do some content control. We could go to the next. So as I think everyone's heard, there's an app for that. There are a multitude of apps that are available that, and I will tell you, they are not foolproof, but they can help monitor the internet use of our kids. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just some of the ones out there. What I would suggest is going through and looking at some of these, determining what types of features they have, and find what meets your family's needs. Some of these have geolocation, some have the ability to block sites. Whatever it is that works for your family, that there will be one that will fit that. Can I have the next? Some of these apps that we've talked about to kind of familiarize yourself with, and I'm not going to, because of time, walk you through each of the steps, but obviously this will be posted. You can go back and look. But I've given you some of the major apps that we see out there, and how you can go in on your child's phone or tablets and set some content control, or set or customize what kind of content they can see. And also some of the ones that do not give you that ability, so that you know which ones you may approve or not approve with your contracts. Can I have the next? Unfortunately, as I said before, nothing is foolproof. And before you panic, if you find or discover that an inappropriate image of your child has been or could be shared, there is help out there. And so I would certainly urge you to reach out to your local law enforcement. In addition, NCMEC, which short for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, has an amazing program called Take It Down. That's their site. It was created to assist people in trying to remove inappropriate photos and videos that could be or have been shared that depict children in inappropriate ways that are 17 and younger. You can also, as Kevin had described about the cyber tips, you can report the photo or video to NCMEC's cyber tip line. And I've included that tip as well, or that site as well. I know that was kind of a very fast preview of some of the things that parents can do. I do hope that this information has been helpful. and assists you in the ultimate goal of all of us, which is to keep every child safe. Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us today. We hope that the session was informative, and many thanks to our presenters. Here we've listed some additional resources provided by our presenters that we hope will be of use to you and your families. We will share a recording of this webinar. Please watch for a follow-up email containing a link to the recording and presentations, responses to questions not covered during the presentations, and an exit survey. Again, this was the second in our series, Protecting the Next Generation of North Carolinians. We hope you will join us for future events in this series in the new year. Our website will be updated with future topics and dates. Please visit ncdoj.gov/nextgenwebinar and share this link with family, friends, and colleagues you think may be interested in the series. Thank you for your interest in learning more about keeping kids safe from online crime.